Good afternoon, and my name is Lev Neretin. I'm working for United Nations Environment Program, but I'm also a coordinator of one of the 18 regional seas programs here specifically in the Northwest Pacific. And this presentation is a joint one which will present some information about the global action by the UN Environment. And also highlight, or at least present, the current progress at the regional dimension through regional seas. I think just many presentations during this conference dealt with SDGs and SDG reporting. I don't want to, I think we had the first day presentation from IOC UNESCO, which presented kind of the flow where the data are coming and how the process will be organized. But I think it's very, this slide is just highlights that the ultimate authority on collecting data and presenting them to the global audience rests with the UN Statistical Commission. And UN Statistical Commission is working with the international agencies like IOC, FAO, IOC, UNESCO, FAO, UNEP, providing those data. But when it comes to actually supplying data to those international organizations, there are currently quite different views and understanding, and this is really work in progress. And specifically for UNEP, and I will be talking mostly about UNEP as the custodian of 26 SDG indicators, and 3 of them are SDG 14 indicators. And in this case, UNEP envisions the role of regional seas as an important mechanism for providing those data. As mentioned during the first day, I think many of those indicators are so-called Tier 3 indicators with the no globally available methodology available. But there are, specifically for UNEP, indicator 14.1, target 14.1, target 14.2 are Tier 3 indicators, and indicator 14.5 is Tier 1 indicator with established methodology. On the first 2, UNEP is working with IOC UNESCO as a supporting agency, and also UNEP is cooperating also with IOC UNESCO and other agencies on the development of other 3 targets which are shown here with the smaller icons. Our work so far resulted in 2 major basically advisory documents produced. One is still in the final draft, and it's so-called the Global Manual on Ocean Statistics. I mean, the purpose of this manual is to provide countries with information on how to measure, how to collect and report those data. And I think the most important that production of this global manual involved missions to Fiji and Colombia, which were used as basically as 2 pilot countries to see how at the national level the information flows could be basically facilitated, how to connect the national statistical services with data reporting process. And the second publication, this is already published, it specifically deals with the role of regional seas and also talks about all other indicators. And here I would like to mention that, as I said, it's work in progress, but the second United Nations Environment Assembly, specifically in its resolution, requested member states and regional seas conventions and action plans with other relevant organizations to work towards implementation and reporting on ocean-related SDGs. So far, there are no basically hard decisions how the process will be organized and specifically how regional seas will be included in this reporting mechanisms. But at the end of my presentation, I will give an example how, let's say, we here in the Northwest Pacific approach this issue without the consensus on basically the global, without agreeing on the global reporting guidelines. Let me go a little bit deeper into specific indicators. I think probably more interesting for this audience, more technical audience. There was a very important workshop dealing with the development of indicator 14.1.1. So there are two parts in this indicator. One is dealing with coastal eutrophication, and the second one dealing with plastic pollution. And again, the workshop was hosted currently in Paris by IOC UNESCO in September last year. And in principle, the workshop took an important approach here, which I think will lay down the groundwork for the development of further indicators. So I think the importance of a driver's pressures state response framework was introduced, and it was agreed that, for example, when you deal with the issues of coastal eutrophication, you have to look at the causes, which are nutrient inputs. You have to discuss indicators related to impacts, chlorophyll A, and also discussing the role of regional seas and monitoring requirements. Let me mention that the workshop resulted in the consensus. There were a lot of discussions, and I encourage you, again, if you are working in this area, to look online, because there are a lot of materials, what has been discussed, or technical materials. But in terms of consensus, there were four major points. One was that the reporting on SDG indicator 14.1.1 will be based on two levels of data. One will be global data, and specifically for sure it's chlorophyll A. And another one will be in situ data and national and regional scale data. Consensus number two, that indicator 14.1.1 should represent a dashboard of sub-indicators. The meeting agreed on the core indicator set and the sub-indicators. And finally, that a UN Environment, or UNEP, will be working closely with various partners. I mentioned regional seas, but I would like to mention that Gesamt was listed here, the GOOS, and obviously the various national institutions. Very briefly here, I don't know if participants will have a chance to see, probably they will have a chance to see the actual presentation. But again, here it's important that the meeting agreed on the core indicators. One of them is the source indicator, index of coastal eutrophication, which will be directly related to SDG 12 on plastic waste, essentially the index of coastal eutrophication, which is a modeling indicator. The second co-indicator is chlorophyll A, and the third set of co-indicators is total nitrogen, inorganic nitrogen, phosphorus, and dissolved oxygen. And again, there is a lot of information there. Many of those indicators are so-called co-indicators of regional seas. When it comes to floating plastic debris density indicator, there's also discussion focused on various types of information and data available, specifically plastic debris or beach litter, kind of in common language, the plastic debris in the water column, finally plastic debris on the seafloor, and the impact indicator, plastic ingestion by biota. And I think I'm sure for some of you from Europe, when it comes to OSPA and UNEP, Mediterranean Action Plan, those two regional seas specifically use some indicator species on plastic ingestion. Here, again, there was agreement on the core parameters and sub-indicators. Specifically, the indicator on plastic waste as a source indicator was agreed, and this one on SDG 12. I think there is a common agreement that the best proxy so far globally would be a concentration of beach litter or plastic litter washed ashore. And finally, the floating plastics, largely using modeling studies. Now I'm coming to the next indicator, which is not yet properly developed, but our experience, so there is no common agreement. So far among regional seas, this is one of so-called co-indicators, which will be rather not quantitative but qualitative, and it speaks about the presence of, let's say, integrated coastal zone management protocols. And during the development of the Manual on Ocean Statistics by UNEP and the case studies in Colombia, for example, this slide presents that Colombia has a national indicator, related indicator. And for example, Colombia will be using the coastal oceanic environmental units as a measure of progress towards implementation of integrated coastal zone management. But I'm not aware that we are planning soon the global meeting on this indicator. But definitely with the integrated coastal zone management frameworks, with marine spatial planning, particularly dramatic progress. I mean, IOC UNESCO is leading globally here on the development of marine spatial planning. There is a lot discussion which has to happen specifically on the indicator 14.2, proportion of exclusive economic zone managed using ecosystem-based approach. Finally, as I mentioned, Tier 1 indicator is well constrained. Our center, World Conservation Monitoring Center in Cambridge, together with IOCN, developed a world database in protected areas. There's a specific indicator which is basically overlays the polygons represented by key biodiversity area over protected areas from this world database. But for sure, I just want to say, although it's a Tier 1 indicator, some of you who are working on marine biodiversity on area-based management tools would agree with me that the key biodiversity areas are largely biased towards birds. And although they are rather representative on the general biodiversity, there is also a lot of scope to improve biodiversity representativeness when it comes, although it's already Tier 1 indicator. I have 2 minutes left. I just wanted to give you some insights how we approach specifically the monitoring and reporting issues. In the Northwest Pacific Action Plan, last year, our member states adopted so-called the medium-term strategy, which essentially aligns all activities of NOPAP. And again, this is the intergovernmental mechanism between Japan, China, Korea, and Russian Federation for regional implementation of SDGs. And one of the important aspects of this is we are currently developing indicators for good environmental status. Again, in Europe, it's familiar, it's a framework directive. In our case, it's ecological quality objectives. Some of these ecological quality objectives, so I listed 5 of them, and specifically first 3, which are dealing with biological diversity, alien species, and eutrophication, not really 4, and contaminants, will be directly related to SDG 14.1, SDG 14.5 indicators, and we aim to align as much as possible those indicators of ecological quality objectives with SDG indicators and start collecting information that will also have a place in global reporting processes when the time comes. And there would be a global consensus on that. Finally, just a few concluding words. Again, I bring us back to the statistical issues that, again, it would be very important, whatever we discuss in the scientific communities among United Nations agencies, it would be very important at the national level to establish proper links to the statistical services which are collecting information and have mandates in this area for definitely UN environment, which considers regional seas and the regional reporting as an important reporting mechanism. there is a lot to do, and we expect that United Nations Assembly in March this year will hopefully make certain recommendations and decisions on the role of regional seas in SDG reporting and follow-up process. And finally, so there's a few people, if you would like to have more information, to my colleagues at headquarters, and when it comes to regional seas, you can contact me. So thank you so much for your attention.